In the shadowed whispers of Mississippi's forgotten bayous, where bloodlines twist like gnarled oaks and secrets fester in the damp earth, dare you linger, sinner, to hear this haunting confession unfold? 3 sisters vanished from the world in the sultry haze of 1852. Their father, one of the richest souls in Mississippi, whispered to folks they'd taken to their beds with a lingering fever, craving utter seclusion. For 11 weary months, no eye beheld them. When a fresh lawman rode into the parish and began probing shadows, he unearthed a darkness that turned even seasoned deputies' stomachs to bile. What Josiah Beaumont had wrought upon his own kin in the shadow of eternal bloodlines would etch itself as one of the bleakest tales in Mississippi lore. A deliberate scheme woven from hollow vows, relentless torment, and a web of deceit stretching clear to the statehouse. Before we wander deeper into the lament of Josiah Beaumont and what truly unfolded behind the bolted shutters of Willowbrook Plantation, I beseech you to heed this call. Press that subscribe key this instant for tales like these, true reckonings that time sought to entomb, seldom rise from the grave. And drop a word below, sharing what bayou or hollow you're hearing from. I yearn to map my flock, for every patch of earth hides its own forsaken sins, and your voices guide which ghosts I summon next. Now, let us drift back to the cradle of this woe, truly, in a river inn's grand hall in Natchez, where scheming hearts convene to ponder the fate of Delta harvests. The roots of terror often sprout in soil that seems wholly sanctified. The spring of 1852 drenched northern Mississippi in untimely storms, churning black loam paths into torrents of sludge and stalling the cotton sowing by nigh 3 weeks. For ordinary growers, this bred fret and ledger reckonings drawn out through dim vigils. For Josiah Beaumont, it birthed a chance-a journey to Natchez for the Delta Farming Assembly, a yearly conclave where estate lords, soil scholars, and merchants gathered to muse on advances in tilling, field cycles, and hand oversight. Josiah had forged his fortune through cunning, not birthright. Unlike the estate gentry who claimed their acres and bondsmen via ancestral chains, he'd begun with a humble cotton patch from a far kin and molded it into one of the thriving ventures in Willow Parish. By 1852, his holding named Willowbrook for the mist-veiled stream that wound its western edge sprawled over near 2,000 acres and sheltered 87 bound laborers. His yields commanded top coin in Vicksburg. His standing remained unchallenged at every vault from Yazoo to Jackson, and his word held sway in the assembly halls, where he'd held 2 sessions before, bowing out to tend his agrarian calls. He was 46 that spring, a widower for 3 turns of the season. His wife Mary had faded from fever in the chill of 1849, bequeathing him 3 daughters and no son to inherit. This void gnawed at him with mounting despair. By Mississippi code, his realm would splinter among his girls at his passing, likely shattering in a span as they wed, and their spouses seized shares. The Beaumont line would fade, swallowed by stranger clans, stranger roots. Eliza, his firstborn, at 22, bore her mother's serene grace and thirst for tomes. She lingered hours in the estate's dim library, poring over tales that Josiah deemed idle, but allowed all the same. Abigail, 20 summers gone, held her father's keen tally sense and oft aided him in sifting estate ledgers, showing a near-masculine knack for trade that both awed and vexed him. Constance, scarce 18, wove magic with brushes and passed endless dusks rendering the Mississippi vistas in faint hues, her stands perched by the brook. All 3 had gleaned learnings rare for Delta dames, tongues of France, figures, chronicles, melodies. Josiah had summoned a mentor from Mobile who dwelt in a shack on the grounds and gave daily lessons. In Josiah's reckoning, this schooling aimed beyond mere grace. He shaped them for shrewd unions to men who'd swell his barter web, maybe even merge bordering holds through pact. But the assembly in Natchez unveiled a notion that appended Josiah's vision wholly. The River Inn's hall shimmered with lantern glow on the eve of April 23rd, 1852. Nigh 200 gents in somber coats crowded the chamber, their murmurs a deep hum pierced by the chime of bourbon tumblers and the rare peal of mirth. Josiah lingered by the victual spread, half-eating a chat on fresh gin mills when a call from the dais sliced the din. Gentlemen, your ears if you will. Our forthcoming voice hails from the Academy of Mobile, where he has delved the budding lore of lineage and its ties to agrarian stock. The orator was Dr. Theodore Voss, a gaunt figure with steel-framed lenses and a zeal verging on frenzy. For 40 ticks, Hep preached on tenets gleaned from overseas sages, notions of veins, past marks, chosen pairings. He waxed on beasts and steeds, how mindful matching birthed hardier progeny, finer toilers, swifter breeds. The laws that rule herds, Dr. Voss proclaimed, his timbre swelling with faith, hold true for all the Lord's creations. Might sires might, wit begets wit. A tiller who grasps these truths can in one cycle overhaul his realm. Josiah hearkened with rising fervor. About him, some heads dipped in ponder, others fidgeted in unease. The shadows loomed unspoken in either. Every soul in that space grasped what all the Lord's creations truly signified. Post the sermon, Josiah neared Dr. Voss at the bar. They conversed over an hour, Josiah posing guarded queries on blood traits, on the craft of choice, on noted outcomes. Voss, puffed by the heat and eased by spirits, spilled more than in clarity. He told of estate masters in Louisiana, testing chosen bonds among bondsmen toiled sturdier hands. He named a grower near Mobile who'd across 15 years forged what he termed a tailored crew through strict lineage schemes. The crux, Voss said, drawing near with liquor scent, is mastering each thread. You cannot yield such to fate, to wild unions. You must ponder like a sage, like a steed tender. Spot your prime stock and forge willful blends. Josiah drank each syllable. His thoughts were already whirling, already scheming. But Voss's next utterance struck him with keen force. Surely the pinnacle trial would entwine cross-vein mating. Blend strength, some term it, merging sundered strains to seize the peak of each. In theory, it might birth wondrous fruits. Yet such a trial would demand caution, Josiah grasped. The seed was sprouting, bold and dire. Here turned to Willowbrook on April 27th, his spirit roiling with visions. The vernal deluges had ceased at last, and his toilers sowed in lengthened watches to reclaim lost hours. He ambled the plots on his dun gelding, eyeing the toil with fresh sight, weighing each hand not solely for their present yield, but for their latent gift to a vaster weave. His gaze fixed on Elijah. Elijah towered 6'3", uncommonly vast for any era's man. He was 31 years aged, birthed on the Beaumont hold, offspring of hands Josiah's kin had bartered in 1819. Unlike most bound men kept blind to script, Elijah had somehow gleaned letters. Josiah reckoned from his dumb, who'd served the great house and perhaps snatched marks from cast-off gazettes. Elijah never paraded this skill, never handed Josiah cause to lash him for it. But Josiah had spied him scanning pinned edicts in the hold's courtyard, his gaze tracing script with plain ken. Beyond script, Elijah bore awit that bloomed in earthly ways. He sensed soil turns by instinct, foretold skis with eerie truth, and once reshaped the hold's water veins to snare more flow from the brook. He toiled with even pace, never shirking, yet never flaunting frantic zeal to curry grace. He was self-held, noble in a mode that Josiah deemed both handy and faintly ominous. Elijah was also unwed, a willed pick Josiah had set years prior. While most lords urged bond vows to swell their ranks by birth, Josiah had held Elijah apart, sensing his worth lay in his rarity rather than spawning middling seed with middling mates. Now drifting past the plots where Elijah labored amid 20 or more, Josiah beheld him anew. He beheld promise. He beheld Antreal that could anchor the Beaumont blood for ages. The scheme coalesced over the ensuing weeks. Josiah passed long eves in his chamber, the portal barred, etching figures and musings in a hide-bound tome he stowed in his desk's false floor. He penned not of crop hauls or bizarre rates. He crafted something uncharted, a methodic lineage rite that would tether his girl's offspring to the hold by vein, birthing a crew of blended kin toilers who could never weave into pale or shadowed folds, who would cling to Willowbrook by fate. The cunning of the weave in Josiah's soul rested in its eternity. These coming grand seed would bear Beaumont essence, yet dwell beyond rightful claim. They would cleave to the soil by birth and decree, barred from heir's grasp, but chained to the kin venture. Josiah would rule them utterly, and they would be wrought by gene for wit and brawn, melding Elijah's frame, might, and mind sharp with the Beaumont strain. But the scheme craved more than mere compelled pairing. It begged a scaffold of right, a tale that would shield Josiah from shame while he chased his right. The aid, or at least the hush, of mighty folk. On May 15th, Josiah bade Justice Silas Abernathy to sup at Willowbrook. Abernathy was 71, a pillar of Willow Parish's law web for 80 years. He'd weighed land feuds, legacy suits, felon hearings. He'd also swelled rich through sly stakes and holds, including a mute share in Josiah's realm. Abernathy had no heirs, no near blood. His fealty bent to whosoever fed his coffers. They feasted on seared fowl and roots served by housebonds who glided soundless round the dining hall's vast oak board. Josiah tarried till post-repast, till they'd withdrawn to the chamber with brandy afore unveiling his seed. He laid it forth with care, cloaking it as a law query, not a soul's one. Justice, I've pondered late cases on blended vein claims. Queer ground, wouldn't you reckon? Abernathy twirled his brandy, his mien even. Queer, surely. Also quite fixed. Blended offspring hold no claim to Whitesire's holdings. The code is stark. Just so, Josiah said, which spawns a curious path. If a soul were to sire seed with no lawful hold on his realm, but tied to it by vein all the same, he might birth an eternal crew that could never flee, never seize title, never shatter the ground through vows or barter. Abernathy's brows arched faint. He grasped now. You're musing in theory, naturally. Naturally, Josiah echoed. Though I ponder if such a pact were real, would the code guard it? Would the souls be veiled from chase or worldly scorn? The justice hushed for a drawn breath, his wit clearly threading the law knots. At length he uttered with weighed care, Mississippi code bars, miscegenation bonds between pale and shadowed, yet chase craves proof, eyes, and chiefly a soul bold to press claims. If such a pact unfolded privately on one's ground, with no outer cries, and if certain shields were set in its record, then by law no sin would stand to hunt. Josiah bent forth. What shields? A trail of script hinting other than willed part by the pale kin, scrolls noting force by the shadowed soul, vowed words perhaps painting a raid or harm that bred dire ends. Such scrolls would veil the honor of any pale dames and damn the shadowed should queries rise. Josiah's blood quickened. The justice was sketching a law cloak for his weave, and if the shadowed one were vowed liberty for his aid, Abernathy's grin was slim and chill. Vows to bonds bear no law heft. They may be kept or snapped at the Lord's whim. A sage might tease such vows to bind aid, then yank them once they filled their call. The bond would hold no plea. They parleyed another hour. Josiah bearing more of his precise weave, Abernathy counseling on law veils and scroll ploys. By the justice's depart from Willowbrook that eve, Josiah held more than counsel. He held a fellow schemer, one with the law might to ward the right from meddling. But Josiah craved more than law shroud. He craved healer scrolls, a leech who'd vouch the vigor of souls and swear to whatsoever tale Josiah wove. He craved one who'd shun thorny probes. Dr. Elias Hawthorne had tended Willowbrook's ills for 6 years, a soul Josiah drew from Yazoo after the prior healer succumbed to swamp fever. Hawthorne was 42, apt no for common woes, but forgettable in all else. He was also sunk in debt. Josiah had gleaned this through sly asks, wager losses, and foul stakes had left him owing hefty sums to sundry Jackson lenders. On May 22nd, Josiah called Hawthorne to the hold under guise of sifting the health of his bound crew. After probing several hands in the watcher's hut, Josiah bade him to the great house for noon meal. The talk began with idle healer chat, fresh bouts of flux, the might of bark for heat, usual hurts among plot toilers. Then Josiah veered to tenderer ground. Healer, I bear an offer that may pique you, one that could mend your coin woes greatly. Hawthorne's mien turned wary. I heed. Josiah laid that he plotted what he named a lineage right to hone his screw. Chosen unions crafted to birth sturdier, sharper hands. He craved healer scrolls throughout vigor probes, womb watches, birthmarks. He would grant Hawthorne $500 yearly beyond his usual toll, a trove for a backwoods leech, for utter hush and aid. Hawthorne took this, his unease plain yet reigned. You're speaking of set bonds among your bonds. Among others, Josiah said guarded. The right will enfold my girls. The hush that trailed was deep. Hawthorne laid his tine, his visage wan. Mr. Beaumont, what you're hinting? I'm hinting not unlawful, Josiah cut. I'm using a watched right to birth sound seed who will linger on this hold forever. You would scroll all as I bid. In trade your debts would vanish, cleared by year's close. You would keep drawing fat pay for your calls, and you would never breathe this to any. Hawthorne's palms quivered slight. He was snared. Josiah knew it, and Hawthorne knew it. The debts crushed him, and this bid meant not mere ease, but breath. What of your girls? Hawthorne queried soft. What do they ken of this? That, Josiah said, is my fret, not yours. Your fret is granting healer aid and scrolls, not more. 3 days since Hawthorne word came he'd take the pact. Josiah now held his law ward and his healerly. The frame stood. All left was to tell his girls their part in his vast right. Josiah picked a Sabbath eve in early June to muster his girls in the salon. Summer had crept with stifling damp, and even with panes ajar, the space felt choked. Eliza, Abigail, and Constance perched on the plush settle, their countenances mirroring wonder laced with dread. Their sire seldom called solemn kin-gathers. He loomed afore the hearth, though no blaze danced in the summer swelter. His palms clasped aft his spine in a stance they knew from youth. The pose he donned when uttering edicts that brooked no quarrel. I've decreed on the morrow of thiskin, he commenced, decrees that will bind the Beaumont mark in this hold firm forages. The girls traded glances. Constance, the least, laced her fingers in her lap, a sign of tense weight. Josiah pressed, his timbre even and commanding. You ken, I have no boys. No man heirs to claim Willowbrook under present code. When I pass, this realm will cleave among you, and through your bonds, it will splinter into stranger clans. The Beaumont legacy will vanish in one turn. "Father," Eliza said mild, "we grasp your woe, but surely there are pacts. I have unearthed a path," Josiah broke. "A way to sire heirs who will cleave forever to this soil, who can never seize title, but will never flee. A crew of rare make, blending the finest of our vein with picked marks from our toil force." The chamber grew stark still. Abigail was the first to grasp, her hue draining. "Father, what precisely do you muse?" Josiah spread it with the cold measure of a trade scheme. Each girl would bear seed with Elijah, his mightiest and most keen bond. These seed would rise at Willowbrook, schooled enough to helm tangled toil, but held in lawful chains. They would core an eternal, refined toil force that could never be traded off or lost to vows. The girls would be tended through their womb times, served by Dr. Hawthorne, and after would reclaim their usual days. The seed would be reared chiefly by bound-wet maids, with the girls keeping whatsoever dam bond they willed. "This is folly," Eliza breathed. "You cannot truly." "I can and I shall," Josiah said blunt. "You will aid this weave or you will stand homeless, without legacy, without any crutch. I will strike you from my bequest wholly, and you will be cast with naught. No upright kin will harbor you once I voice your defiance." Constance began to weep, silent drops coursing her cheeks. Abigail sat stiff, her teeth set. Eliza gazed at her sire as if beholding a stranger in known lines, spying an alien in kin traits. "What of Elijah?" Abigail queried, her timbre void. "Does he hold any pick in this?" Josiah's mien hardened. "Elijah is my chattel. He will heed my will. He will be vowed his liberty and ground of his own once the seed are birthed and nursed. Eric on that vow will bind his aid." "You're deceiving him," Abigail said. "You bear no mind to loose him." Josiah shunned denial. "What I vow a bond is my fret." "Your fret is meeting your call to this kin." The gather dragged another hour with Eliza seeking sense, Abigail veiling warns to tell powers, and Constance merely sobbing. Josiah met each plea with chill reason and threats. He had foreseen each barb, readied each retort. He reminded them they were unwed dames with no loan means, that their names would be ruined if they spurned him, that no bench in Mississippi would back girls against a sire of his rank. At last, he gave his sealing word. "You have 1 week to yield this weave by choice. If you spurn, I will deem all 3 of you mind-broken and have Justice Abernathy bind you to the state madhouse in Meridian, where you will dwell your remaining days. I have already mused this path with him, and he's vowed the scrolls can be sealed in one dawn." With that, he left them in the salon, their morrow sealed, their wills stripped bare. The morrow after, Josiah called Elijah to his chamber. Elijah entered worn as any bound soul would when hailed before the Lord. He loomed near the portal, his stance deferent but not cringing, abiding. Josiah waved to a seat. "Sit." Elijah sat, bewildered plain in his gaze. Bonds were never bad to perch in the Lord's chamber. "I bear an offer for you," Josiah commenced. "One that could seal your liberty and your dawn." Over the next 30 ticks, Josiah traced the weave with willed skips and measured falsehoods. He told Elijah that his girls needed to sire seed to bind the kin mark, but that he willed those seed to hold rare marks, wit, might, skill. He told Elijah he'd been picked for he was the prime hand on the hold, a soul of stark wit and firm make. He told Elijah that for his part, he would gain his loose scrolls after the seed were birthed, with 20 acres of till near the Tennessee line and $500 to don his fresh path. Elijah hearkened in dazed hush. The bid seemed beyond, too lavish, but the Lord's visage showed only grave truth. "Why me?" Elijah queried at length. "For you're rare," Josiah replied, "and for I will my grand seed to Berar. You'll be tended well through this rite. You'll dwell in finer huts, gain finer fare, and when it's sealed, you'll stand free with ground of your own, all scrolled by law. Elijah's wit world, liberty soil a span beyond chains." The bid tugged him with an yielding pull, but doubt chewed its rims. Why would a soul like Josiah Beaumont truly loose his prime bond? "What of your girls?" Elijah queried guarded. "They yield to this." "They grasp their call to the kin," Josiah said, the falsehood sleek and honed. "Their willed parts in binding the Beaumont dawn." Elijah craved to trust it. The other, that Josiah would compel such a pact, seemed too vile even for a bondlord, and the vow of liberty gleamed so fierce it scorched his wary bends. "If I spurn," Elijah queried, Josiah's mien shadowed, "then I will trade you to a rice hold in the Delta bogs where you'll toil thigh-deep in plague swamps till fever or wear claims you, which oft takes less than 5 turns." The pick wasn't a pick. Elijah dipped slow. "I'll heed." Josiah grinned and drew a scroll, a pact of kinds, though law void since bonds couldn't pact, but it traced the vows Josiah had uttered. Liberty, soil, coin. Elijah marked his name in guarded, honed strokes. What he ignored, what he couldn't ken, was that Josiah had already penned a second sheaf of scrolls, papers that would name Elijah a runner if he ever sought flight, that would charge him with harming the Beaumont girls, that would limn him as a fierce felon, not a yielding part. Justice Abernathy had already marked them, future dated and set to file if Elijah ever turned thorn. The snare was sealed, forged from falsehoods and law twists, poised to clamp on all entwined. On June 14, 1852, Dr. Hawthorne came to Willowbrook to lead what he named early vigor probes. He met alone with each girl, probing them with trade distance while shunning gaze meet. Eliza stayed chill mute throughout. Abigail posed sharp queries on if he sensed any soul clash with what unfolded. Queries he warded with healer tongue. Constance wept soft through the whole probe. Hawthorne named all three dames sound and apt to bear seed. He gave Josiah a penned tale to that end, his first scroll in what would swell a vast healer file. That same week, Elijah was shifted from the bond huts to a wee shack near the great house, a frame once for tool hoard. It was scoured, set with a pallet, a board, and a lamp. He was granted fresh garb, finer victual. Other bound folk noted these shifts and murmured among, guessing what grace Elijah had gained, what role he played in the Lord's weaves. The packs pressed through late June. Josiah met apart with each girl, setting their tides. Eliza would lead in early July, trailed by Abigail in mid-July and Constance in late July. He limned the tide as if plotting field turns, his timbre healer cold and aloof. You will each pass 3 unbroken eves with Elijah in the shack, Josiah bade. Dr. Hawthorne will watch your vigor throughout. If womb doesn't quicken from the first try, we will redo the rite the next moon. This holds till all 3 of you are vowed with child. The girls took these bids in a gasped hush. Their defiance crushed by warns and thevist, might their sire held over every thread of their spans. On the eve of July 3rd, Eliza was led to the shack by Josiah himself. He rapped the portal and guided her within sans rite. Elijah loomed near the pane, his visage a veil of muddle and unease. He had awaited other, not this mute, wan young dame who eyed him with orbs full of woe and spite. Josiah left them lone, setting a watcher named Harlan Voss outside the shack with bids to linger through the dark. The word was stark. No one fled. No one slipped. What transpired in that shack over 3 eves isn't a tale we'll paint fine. It's enough to utter that 2 souls were caged in an undone bind, compelled to closeness neither craved, both prey to Josiah's measured ruth. Eliza's ledger from those days, later ash by Josiah, held but one echoed plea, Lord pardon us all. By mid-August, all 3 girls had sealed their bait eves with Elijah. Dr. Hawthorne came weekly to lead probes. On September 2nd, he vowed what Josiah had awaited. All 3 girls were with child. Josiah's bent was one of sated win. He swiftly veiled his girls from outer touch, telling folk they bore a frail ale that begged cot hush and veil. The panes of their upper chambers were set with bolts on the out. A wet maid, a bound dame named Lila, who'd clung to Thekin for scores, was set to tend them full, fetching fare, clearing pots, keeping bases, while binding they never strayed their cells unwatched. Elijah was cast back to plot toil, but held apart from other hands. His shack stayed his dwell, a stark mark of his rare rank. Other bound shunned him now, sensing rot, but unable to voice what. He'd turned outcast sons, grasping why. Josiah passed his days musing the births, shaping cradle nooks, querying bound dames to nurse, weaving a schooling rite for the seed that would dawn at 4. At dark he perched in his chamber, penning in his veiled tome, scrolling each thread of his rite with the pride of a sage on breakthrough's brink. None of them, not Josiah, not his girls, not Elijah, grasped that a soul beyond Willowbrook was starting to spy oddities, a soul who'd soon loom threat toll Josiah had wrought. The sultry haze of 1852 yielded to fall with its usual shifts. Cotton plots whitened with reap. Heats fell from crushing to mere heavy, and the kin calendar of Willow Parish resumed after the agrarian hush of late haze. It was in this tide of rebirth that lawman Ezekiel Thorne came to Riverton, the parish seat, to claim his fresh post. Thorne was 34, a scarred hand from the Mexican strife, who'd returned to plain life with honors for valor and a deep mistrust of might. He'd held 2 years as underlaw in Charleston, South Carolina, afore seeking the vacant spot in Willow Parish, a spot that had sudden opened when the prior lawman fell to heart woe in July. The parish elders had taken Thorne for he was outer. Willow Parish had gained a name for slack guard of certain codes for a cozy pact between rich growers and local hands that bred scant metal with hold affairs. Some elders willed that way to hold. Others, including fresh merchants and wheat tillers, craved true law. Thorne stood middle, skilled enough to draw heed, but unknown enough to maybe stir rooted rot. He came to Riverton on September 15th, claiming rooms over the law hall. His first weeks went to mapping the land, meeting unders he'd gained from his 4, sifting bench scrolls and open hunts. He swiftly shaped views. The parish was rich but split with a clutch of vast holds ruling most soil and goods, while lesser tillers scraped edges. The prior lawmen had scarce trod the greater holds, deeming them nigh sovereign realms. Thorn's war scars had taught him to eye afore strike, to hoard ken afore moves. So heed and hearkened, giving keen ear to which marks kept rising in talk, which souls held true sway beyond their titled ranks. Josiah Beaumont's mark rose oft. Folk spoke of him with blend of awe and ware. Awe for his coin and sway, ware for something harder to pin. In a tavern chat in late September, a trader named Jedediah Crosby named Beaumont's girls in a way that snared Thorn's heed. Pity on those lasses, Crosby said, nursing ale. All three fell sick at once, word is. Been sealed in that grand pile for moons now. What manner of ale? Thorn queried idle. Crosby shrugged. Beaumont vows it's some dame woe, craves veil and cot hush, but it's queer, ain't it? All three at once, and none spied them since June. Thorn stowed this without word. It might mean naught. Sickness did strike kin's whole, and rich growers oft veiled kin matters. But it logged his worth mind. His wonder deepened in early October when he met Dr. Hawthorne by chance at the Law Hall. Hawthorne was there to file past certificates. 2 bonds from a hold east of Riverton had faded from heat. Usual scrolls craving official mark. Thorne chanced to sift other scrolls when Hawthorne neared the scribe. Something in Hawthorne's bent struck Thorne as awry. A fret that seemed over for the plain task. When Hawthorne left, Thorne queried the scribe on him. Dr. Hawthorne. He's leached to sundry holds. Apt enough, though word says he has a wager woe. Owes coin all over Jackson from what I hear. He seemed vexed to you just now, Thorne queried. The scribe pondered. Now that you voice it, yes, skittish. But leeches see much end. Maybe it grinds a soul. Thorne let it fall, but the mark lingered. A fretful leech filling usual scrolls didn't always sign ill. But Thorne had learned in strife that we oddities oft pointed to greater woes. The tie between Beaumont and Hawthorne cleared in late October, when Thorne chanced to ride past Willowbrook and spied Hawthorne's cart on the main path, clear from the hold. On whim, Thorne trailed its span. Hawthorne halted at a weedon in Riverton, where Justice Abernathy kept a lone trade apart from his bench calls. The leech went within and lingered nigh an hour. Thorne abode across the way, feigning check of his steed's irons. When Hawthorne rose, he seemed more stirred than afore, dabbing his brow with a cloth despite the chill October breeze. Justice Abernathy loomed in the threshold, eyeing Hawthorne's leave with a look, and Thorne couldn't fully read something twixt content and warn. Now Thorne held 3 linked threads. Beaumont's girls in veiled seclusion, a fretful leech making steady calls to the hold, and a justice meeting lone with that leech. Alone, each could be pure. Joined, they wove a pattern that vexed him. He began querying guarded Anslant. He spoke with traders who fed Willowbrook, with tillers whose ground edged Beaumont land, with any who might hold fresh ken of the hold. What he gleaned was clashing and muddled. Some limbed Beaumont as a prime grower, stern but even, thriving but not showy. Others hinted darker whispers, bonds who'd tried flight and vanished eternal. Lashes beyond the dire norm, a chill in Beaumont that verged on ruth. On the girls, words were steady. They hadn't been eyed in open since early June. Chapel goes, kin calls, jaunts to Riverton for wares, all had halted sudden. Beaumont's tale Ophail was taken by most, but a few voices doubted. Those lasses were hale as oxen in spring. One aged dame told Thorne post-Sabbath rites, I spied Eliza at Pasha. She was wholly sound. Then sudden all 3 crave cot hush for moons. Doesn't rest right. Thorne decreed he craved to tread Willowbrook direct. He wrought a guise, a usual ask on a sought runner supposed spied in the realm. On November 3rd, he rode to the hold. The near to Willowbrook was grand. A long lane hedged with willows leading to Atwotier Hold House of faded stucco with pillars and wide porches. Plots stretched always, most reaped now, with hands scorching stubs in rained blazes that sent plumes of smoke into the ashen fall sky. A watcher met Thorne at the gate, a soul named Obadiah Kane, who named himself Sans Warmth or Spite. Lawman Thorne, what draws you to Willowbrook? Thorne laid his wrought cause, limning a false fled bond from a near parish. Kane hearkened sans mien, then shook his crown. Ain't spied any matching that mark. We keep tight here. Mr. Beaumont shuns runners or fleers on his soil. I'd crave to speak Mr. Beaumont direct if he's free. Kane tarried slight. Mr. Beaumont is tied with kin woes. I can pass any law queries. Kin woes? Thorne queried pure. Not grave, I pray. His girls are ailing. Craves his heed. I'm sorrowed to hear, Thorne said. Maybe I could give respects. Grant any aid the kin might crave. That won't be needed, Kane replied stern. Mr. Beaumont prizes his kin's veil in this hard tide. Thorne dipped, but his bends were howling now. The watcher's guard, the careful bar of house reach, the vague nods to ale, it all felt drilled, shielding. He thanked Cain and rode off, but not far. He looped back through the thickets edging Willowbrook's eastern line, where the brook ran from a hid spot in the boughs. He eyed the hold for over an hour. He spied plot hands shifting twixt sheds, smoke climbing from the cook hut, usual beats of hold life. But he also spied something queer. A wee shack near the great house, apart from bond huts with a soul standing out. Not toiling, just standing, eyeing. The soul wasn't like a ward. Thorne returned to Riverton with more queries than answers. That eve, he did something odd for a lawman. He trod the parish scrolls den after hours, letting in with keys he'd gained his post. He passed 3 hours by lamp glow sifting land scrolls, bench papers, and he tied to Josiah Beaumont. What he unearthed was a limb of measured gain and law twists. Beaumont had swallowed 3 lesser near farms over the past score, ever through seizures. He'd seemingly wrought by granting coin, then calling debts. He'd bintied in sundry suits, all sealed his way, oft with Justice Abernathy ruling. There were marks of bond buys, cotton trades, toll pays, all etched fine. Then Thorne found something that halted him. A ground shift dated September 10th, 1852, marked but not yet done. It shifted 20 acres near the Tennessee line from Beaumont to Elijah Freeman. The scroll was marked by Beaumont and eyed by Justice Abernathy, but noted-eyed upon meet of terms to be set. A vow of soil to a bond. That was queer enough, but the tide, September, just post the girl's veil dawned, hinted link. Thorne's wit whirled. Whatterms? What had this Elijah done or yielded to do? He found no other nods to Elijah in the scrolls. No trade bill showing when Beaumont gained him, which hinted he'd been birthed on the hold. Thorne made guarded notes and reset the scrolls to their nooks. Over the next 2 weeks, Thorne softly probed Justice Abernathy. He gleaned the justice was rich beyond his bench pay with stakes in many holds, including Willowbrook. He gleaned Abernathy had a name for siding with growers in nigh every clash with bonds or toil. Hagland that Abernathy and Beaumont supped steady, that their tie went beyond trade grace into true share. On November 20th, Thorne gained word that set his doubts firm. A tiller named Cyrus Hale came to his den hat and palm, clear fretful. "Lawman, I don't ken if this weighs, but I reckon something fouls at Willowbrook." Thorne bade him perch. "Tell what you've eyed." Hale laid that his till bordered Willowbrook's northern rim. In late October, he'd been chasing deer in the thickets near the line when he heard wailing, a dame's voice from the great houseway. Not a wail of fear precise, but of ache or grief. It had held but a few breaths, then ceased sharp. "I mused going to eye," Hale said. "But Beaumont shunned trespass, and I figured, well, it might have been a bond lashed. That's his realm, not mine." "But you reckon it wasn't a bond?" Thorne said. Hale shook his crown slow. "That wail didn't sound like any shadowed dame I've eared. It sounded schooled fine, like one of them Beaumont lasses." Thorne felt chill surety settle over him. Something was dire wrong at Willowbrook. Something tying those veiled girls. But what? And how could he probe sans proof, sans right, to raid a high soul's dwell? He craved Morkan, best from one within the hold. That meant seeking a bond bold to speak. A perilous bid in Mississippi, where bonds faced dire lash for voicing against lords, and where lawmen were oft more true to growers than to right. Thorne began haunting the mart in Riverton on Sabbath eves, when some holds let bonds trade wee goods or yield from own patches. He eyed Forney from Willowbrook, craving a chance to speak lone with one who might ken what transpired. On December 7th, his abide bore fruit. He spied an elder-shadowed dame vending egg sand eared another buyer named She from Willowbrook. Thorne tarried till she stood lone, then neared with guarded ease. "Those eggs seem fresh," he said. "I'll take a score." As she tallied them to his weave, he uttered soft, not eyeing her straight, "I'm Lawman Thorne. I'm exed on the Beaumont girls. Are they truly ailing?" The dame's palm stilled for a breath. When she spoke, her timbre scarce heard. "Can't say, sir. Don't eye them much, but you've eyed them. They're breathing." A halt. Then nigh unseen, she dipped. "Are they harmed?" Held against will. The dame sealed tallying eggs, her mien blank. But as she gave the weave, she bent close for a breath and breathed 3 words. "Elijah's shakivs." Then she shifted swift, calling her rates to other buyers, leaving Thorne with his eggs and a phrase that meant all and naught. December brought chill deluge and the swelling truth of 3 with child dames caged in their cells at Willowbrook. Dr. Hawthorne made weekly calls, scrolling each womb's march with trade aloof that scarce veiled his soul unease. All 3 dames were sound, the wombs pressing normal, awaited births in late March or early April. Josiah's content swelled with each fair tale. He passed hours musing the cradle sets, querying bound dames to serve as milkmaids, weaving a schooling rite for the seed that would dawn at 4. In his soul, the rite thrived flawless. Elijah yet was unraveling. The vow of liberty that had held him through haze now felt ever hollow. He'd been cast back to usual plot toil in September, but stayed veiled from other bonds, housed in his shack. Neither trusted by the bound fold, nor taken by the pale watchers, he dwelt in a threshold space, abiding a vowed loose that seemed to fade further with each passing week. In mid-December, he wrought a slip born of despair. He neared Josiah direct while the Lord eyed the cotton hoard barns, querying when his loose scrolls would be set. Josiah's mien shadowed. The pack named after the seed are birthed and nursed. That means at least a year post-birth, you'll gain your liberty in 1854, not a 4. But the scroll you showed me said, the scroll set upon seal of terms, Josiah Cutchell. I set when terms seal. You'd be sage to mind your spot here, Elijah. You're still my chattel, and you'll hold so till I decree other. Elijah felt the snare closing round him. The vow had been vague by will, wrought to draw his aid sons binding Josiah to any tide. He could stall liberty eternal, ever finding fresh binds, fresh calls. That eve Elijah perched in his shack musing flight. He could run. Bonds did it oft, though few thrived. The north lay hundreds leagues off. Hunters eyed every path, and a soul his bulk would be spied instant. But abiding meant eyeing Josiah's falsehoods, swell meant lingering bound while his seed grew as chattel. He was still weighing these undone picks when he eared a soft rap on his portal. He opened to find Lawman Thorn looming in the gloom lone, his mark hid under his cloak. "We need parley," Thorn said soft. "And we'll lack much time." Elijah's first bend was fear. Had Josiah sent the lawman to seize him for some wrought sin? But something in Thorn's stance hinted other. This wasn't a law call. "On what?" Elijah queried warned. "On what's unfolding in that pile. On those girls. On whatsoever pact Josiah Beaumont compelled on you all." Elijah's blood raced. How much did this pale lawman ken? How much could be safely uttered? Voicing against your lord to powers oft meant dire lash or end. But Elijah spied something in Thorn's orbs. Not the usual chill way of a pale law soul, but true fret. "I can't," Elijah dawned. "I can you're in peril," Thorn cut. "I can Beaumont vowed you liberty, and I can he's false. I've eyed the ground shift scroll. It's tied, which means he can yank it any tide. He'll never loose son some metal." Elijah hushed, rent twixt hope and doubt. Thorn pressed urgent. "I crave to ken what transpired. I crave proof. If Beaumont compelled those dames into whatsoever unfolds here, that's unlawful, even by Mississippi code. If I can prove it, I can halt him. But I crave your word." "My word?" Elijah's laugh was bitter. "I'm a bond. My voice means naught in any bench." "It means to me," Thorn said. "And if I can gain back from the girls themselves from others, then joined it might suffice. But I crave the truth first." Elijah eyed this pale lawman who risked his post, maybe his span, to probe a high grower. It seemed beyond, too fair to hold. But what pick did he hold? Hush and linger bound eternal, or voice and maybe barely find right? He sealed his pick. Over the next hour, uttering in breaths in the shack's gloom, Elijah told Thorn all. The assembly in Natchez and Josiah's haunt with bloodlines, the false vows of liberty, the compelled pacts with the girls, the tie of Justice Abernathy and Dr. Hawthorne, the veiling of the dames, all of it. Thorn hearkened with swelling dread. This wasn't mere harm of bonds, though that soul would have vexed him. This was methodical breach of Josiah's own girl-scrolled plot tying bench hands, fine law frames wrought to veil vile acts. "I crave to parley with the girls," Thorn said when Elijah sealed. "I crave to ear from them direct." "They're bolted in their cells," Elijah said. "Josiah rules all. The only souls who eye them are Thuwit maid Lila and Dr. Hawthorne. Then I crave to parley with Lila. She's terrified of Josiah. She won't voice to you." Thorn pondered. "What of Hawthorne?" "He's the frail link. He's paid to hush, but he's not law. He lacks Abernathy's ward. If I press him, he might snap." They parleyed till nigh midnight, weaving a scheme. It was peril for both. If Josiah unearthed Thorn's probe, he could wield his tie webs to yank the lawman from post. If Josiah unearthed Elijah's aid, lash would be swift and dire. But both souls had reached the same end. Not guaranteed lingering dread. Thorn left the shack just afore dawn, shifting through the thickets, not the main path. He returned to Riverton and passed the day setting. He craved hold over Hawthorne. Something to compel the leech's aid. The answer came through coin scrolls. Thorn trod 3 vaults, claiming law probe into untied matters, and gleaned that Hawthorne's debts had truly been cleared in September. Hefty sums, wiped at once. The pays had come from a hoard tied to Josiah Beaumont. That proved coin tie twixt Beaumont and Hawthorne, though not always sin, but it was a dawn point. On December 22nd, Thorn rode to Hawthorne's dwell in Yazoo, coming in bad in the eve. Hawthorne answered the portal himself, his visage waning when he spied the lawman's mark. "Dr. Hawthorne, I crave to parley on your healer toil at Willowbrook Plantation." "I that's veiled. Sick hush." "Sick hush doesn't ward felon plot," Thorn cut. and I hold proof that you're paid by Josiah Beaumont to scroll acts that break Mississippi code. Hawthorne's visage went from wan to ash. I don't ken what you mean. I reckon you do. I reckon Josiah Beaumont cleared your wager debts for your hush on what he's wrought to his girls. I reckon you've been scrolling compelled wombs while feigning their willed. And I reckon you're terrified of what dawns when this rises. They loomed in the threshold, chill December gust whirling them. Hawthorne's palms quivered. If you aid my probe, Thorne said soft, I can grant you ward. If you shun, you'll face Chase's ally when this dawns. And it will dawn, leech. I vow you that. Hawthorne's defiance crumbled. Come within. We shouldn't parley here. Dr. Hawthorne's owning took 3 hours and filled a score pages in Thorne's ledger. He limned Josiah's first near in May, the vows of pay, the probe of the girls who were clear unwilling parts. He traced the moon calls through the wombs, the healer scrolls he'd falsed to make all seem yielded. He owned his part in birthing a scroll trail that would ward Josiah from Chase. He showed me law scrolls, Hawthorne said, his timbre hollow. Papers that would charge Elijah with harm if queries rose. Justice Abernathy had already marked them. The whole was wrought to be unslippable. If the girls ever voiced out, Josiah could claim they false to shield their raider. If Elijah tried flight, he'd be hunted as a flea and violator. It was flawless. Vile, but flawless. Do you hold copies of these scrolls? Thorne queried. No, Josiah keeps all bolted in his chamber. But I've eyed them. Vowed words from the girls pre-marked claiming Elijah harmed them. Healer tales I supposedly penned limning hurts tying to harm. Hurts that never were. All needed to flip the tale if craved. Thorne felt ill. Josiah had built a law foretround his sin, making Chase nigh beyond. What of Justice Abernathy? What's his precise part? He counseled Josiah on the law frame. He'll mark any scroll Josiah craves, and he's set to bind the girls to the madhouse if they ever try to voice against their sire. He told me that direct. Said it was the ward if they turned Thorne. This was worse than Thorne had mused. A seated justice actively plotting to cage likely voices to bar word. I crave you to pen all you just uttered, Thorne said. Mark it and have it sealed. That word becomes proof. Josiah will slay me. Hawthorne breathed. Or have me slain. You don't grasp the might he holds. I grasp fully, Thorne echoed. Which is why we crave swift move. Once I hold your word, I'm going to the state law head in Meridian. This swells beyond parish right now. We crave state metal. Hawthorne passed the rest of the dark penning his owning. By dawn, Thorne held a marked sealed scroll from a bound healer, owning to plot and tracing Josiah's whole weave. It wasn't enough to damn Josiah alone. They still craved word from the girls and back from Elijah, but it was a dawn. Thorne rode hard to Meridian, reaching the seat on Yule Eve. The lawhead's den was shut for the holy, but Thorne tracked the lawhead himself, a soul named Gideon Hale at his dwell. Hale was first irked by the break, but as he scanned Hawthorne's owning, his mien shifted to shock. This is beyond, Hale said. If true, this marks felon plotting many bench hands. Justice Abernathy soul. My lord, a seated justice plotting false cage. I hold word from the bond Elijah backing all, Thorne said. And I trust the girls will voice once warded from their sire. But I crave might to draw them from that hold and seize Josiah Beaumont afore he unearths the probe. Hale scanned the scroll again, his law wit weighing proof and right. This is tangled. The prey are pale dames, which usual would make Chase straight, but they're unwed girls under their sire's law rule. Some would claim he holds right to set their bonds or lineage as he deems, chief if he vows they yielded. They didn't yield, Thorne said blunt. They were warned with the madhouse if they spurned. I trust you, but proving it craves their word. And if Abernathy can name them mind-broken afore they voice, we lose our suit. We crave to move as one, secure the dames, seize Beaumont, and hold Abernathy all at once. If any gains warn, they can ash-proof or hush voices. They passed the next 2 days weaving. Hale penned seize writs and ward custody bids. He drew 3 state wards to aid Thorne. They set law scrolls yanking Justice Abernathy brief from his post-pending probe. All was set to transpire as one on December 27th, but some had spied Thorne's probe. Some was eyeing. On December 26th, Josiah Beaumont gained a caller, a scribe from the lawhead's den, a soul named Harlan Voss, who swelled his scant state pay by trading ken to keen folk. Voss had eyed the writs set, had scanned Hawthorne's owning when filed, and instant spied a chance. He rode to Willowbrook and was guided to Josiah's chamber, where he spread all he'd gleaned. Thorne's probe, Hawthorne's betray, the set seizes timed for the morrow. Josiah's mien stayed calm, but his wit whirled with lethal reckon. He paid Voss $200 for the ken and sent him. Then he called Harlan Voss, his most true watcher. We hold a woe that craves mend, Josiah said soft. By dawn, Lawman Thorne left Meridian afore light on December 27th, with 3 state wards. They set to reach Willowbrook by mid-morn, serve the writs, and hold Josiah Beaumont caged by noon. Thorn felt guarded hope. They held proof. They held might. They held surprise on their flank. They lost surprise 10 leagues outside Riverton. A trunk had been felled across the path, barring way. As the riders slowed, shots burst from the thickets on both flanks. One ward fell instant, pierced through breast. Another's steed wilded and cast him. Thorn drew his iron and shot back, but the bushwhack was too set. Within breaths, all 4 lost souls were pinned aft their fallen steeds, taking shroud as lead tore the morn ether. The strike held less than 5 ticks. When it sealed, 2 wards were ended. One was dire hurt, and Thorn had taken lead through his left blade. The strikers, at least 6 souls, all veiled, melted into the bows sans clear sight. Thorn knew instant this was Josiah's work. Somehow he'd been warned, which meant all was rent. The seized the ward of the girls, all. He managed to set the hurt ward on a steed and limp to Riverton, leaving the ended where they'd fell. He went straight to the leech's den where his blade was bound and the other ward named Beyond Mend. The soul faded that noon. By eve, when Thorn finally had his senses enough to ponder clear, he grasped Josiah would be ashing proof and setting wards. The girls were in swift peril. If Josiah deemed them threats, he could slay them and claim they faded in birth. Elijah was in worse peril. He could be slain and his husk hid, yanking the key voice. Despite his hurt, despite no law back, Thorn knew he craved swift act. He drew 4 armed souls from Riverton, tillers, and traders who'd eared the strike and were riled that a lawman had been bushwhacked on open paths. They weren't schooled law, but they were wroth and ironed, which would suffice. At dusk, they rode for Willow Brook. Meanwhile, Josiah was setting his fallback weave. He'd known from the breath Voss warned him that the bind was unsalvable. The probe would press regardless of bushwhack. He couldn't halt it, but he could rule the tale. He called Justice Abernathy to the hold. The justice came within an hour, and the 2 souls met in Josiah's chamber. "We crave to do the safeguard," Josiah said. "The papers naming the lass's mind broken. File them this eve. This eve?" Abernathy looked unsure. "Josiah, there's been a strike on state wards. If we file aught now, it'll seem like a sire warding his girls from further woe." Josiah cut. "They were breached by a bond. That bond is nigh seized and ended. In their frail mind state, they cannot face query or word. We're warding them. That's the tale, and Elijah." Josiah's grin was chill. Elijah tried flight. He was shot while fleeing. "His husk will be found in the thickets tomorrow morn." Abernathy went for Iwan. "You're going to end him. I'm going to yank a woe. Are you with me or against, Silas? For if against, you're bared too. Hawthorne's owning ties you direct." The justice was snared and he knew it. "What do you crave from me?" "Mark the mind-broken bids. File them with the bench scribe this eve. I'll pay him to backtide them to last week afore Thorne's probe dawned official. Then go dwell and abide. When this seals, you and I will stand fine. Our tale is sealed." Abernathy dipped reluctant and left with the scrolls. Josiah then went to find Harlan Voss. "Get Elijah. Bring him to the brook, to the deep curve past the eastern plot. Make it seem he tried cross and drowned. Hold him under if craved, but make sure he's ended. I crave his husk found, but not swift. Give it 2 or 3 days." Voss, who'd heeded Josiah's bids for 15 years and long ceased querying them, just dipped. An hour hence, as full gloom fell, Voss and 2 other souls went to Elijah's shack. They told him Josiah craved him urgent. Elijah, sensing rot but holding no pick, went with them. They trod toward the eastern plots, seeming to head the great house. But at the brook, Voss sudden grabbed Elijah from aft. The other 2 souls moved in. Elijah was mighty, but 3 to 1 gave scant chance. They wrestled him to the flow. Elijah fought desperate, grasping this was end, not rest. He broke free brief and fled, but one of the souls downed him at the brook's rim. They dragged him into the water, pressing his crown under. The brook was icy in December, and the pull was strong. Elijah thrashed and fought, his breath-burning gloom closing. He mused the liberty he'd been vowed, the false that had led him here. He mused the 3 dames in that pile, with child of seed who'd birth into chains by Josiah's vile right. Then, just as sense faded, he eared a shot. Voss loosed him sudden. Elijah's crown broke the surface, and he gasped air, hacking and choking. There were more shots and cries. Through blurred sight, he spied shapes on steed. Lawman Thorn and 4 armed souls, their irons drawn. One of Josiah's watchers was down, shot in limb. The other held palms high in yield. Voss was fleeing to the thickets. But one of Thorn's souls fired, and Voss fell. Clutching flank, Thorn dismounted awkward, his left limb in bind, and waded the brook to draw Elijah out. "Are you whole?" Elijah couldn't voice, could only dip as he lay gasping on the bank. "We're sealing this," Thorn said. "This eve." They left 2 souls to ward the seized watchers and rode for the great house. Josiah spied them coming and barred the front portal, but Thorn's souls broke it with blades. They found Josiah in his chamber, calm perched at his desk as if hosting awaited kin. "Lawman Thorn," Josiah said cool. This is unlawful entry. I'll have you yanked from post. You're caged for plot, for tried slay, and for false cage of your girls, Thorne echoed. Where are they? My girls are ailing and cannot be stirred. Justice Abernathy has marked bids, naming them mind broken to voice. Any trituckery them is code barred. Those bids are void, Thorne said, though he wasn't sure that held. Where are they? Josiah grinned. I won't tell, and you can't probe my dwell sans cause. Mississippi Code is stark on hold rights. Elijah, still dripping from the brook, stepped forth. Upper tier, eastern wing, 3 cells in line, all bolted from out. Josiah's grin faded. You hold no might here, Bond. He's my voice, Thorne said. And you're caged. 2 souls stayed to bind Josiah while Thorne and Elijah climbed the steps. They found the 3 portals, each with heavy bar on out. Thorne opened them one by one. Eliza, Abigail, and Constance Beaumont perched in their cells, all heavy with child, all eyeing the sudden breach with blend of hope and dread. Eliza voiced first, her timbre hoarse from moons of scant use. Are you here to aid us? Yes, Thorne said. I'm Lawman Ezekiel Thorne. You're safe now. Your sire is caged. All 3 dames began weeping, not from grief, but from swelling relief after 7 moons of cage. The hearing of Josiah Beaumont dawned on February 14, 1853 in the Mississippi State Bench in Meridian. The spot had been shifted from Willow Parish due to frets on local lien and Justice Abernathy's sway. Abernathy himself had been held from his post and faced apart charges of plot and bench rot. The chase laid Hawthorne's owning, Elijah's word, and most dire fine words from Eliza, Abigail, and Constance Beaumont limning their sire's warns, their compelled veil, and the methodical make of his weave. The ward claimed that Josiah had sought to bind his kinmark through queer, but not unlawful paths, that his girls had first yielded afore later ruing their picks, and that Elijah was a willing part who'd taken liberty for aid. The hearing held 9 days. Open mind was split. Some eyed Josiah as a fiend who'd breached his own girls, others as a desperate sire seeking to hold his birthright in a flawed realm. The truth that his prey were pale dames made chase able. Had he wrought the same with bound dames, no hearing would have dawned. On February 23rd, the peers returned damned marks on charges of false cage and plot. They cleared him of tried slay, finding scant proof that he'd self-bade Thorne's bushwhack or Elijah's drowned try. His watchers had acted lone, the ward won. Josiah was doomed to 12 years in the state cage. Justice Abernathy was damned of bench wrong and plot. He gained 8 years and was eternal barred. Dr. Hawthorne, who'd aided the chase full, gained a held doom and had his healer mark yanked in Mississippi. He shifted to Louisiana and toiled under other name. The 3 Beaumont girls birthed in late March and early April of 1853. 2 lads and a lass, all sound. Eliza's lad was named Ezekiel after the lawman who'd saved them. Abigail's lass was named Faith. Constance's lad was named Elijah. The girls faced a hard pick. Keep seed born from woe or yield them. After long muse, they decreed to keep. The seed were blended in Mississippi, which meant bound dawns and endless scorn. But they were also pure of their grandsire's sins. The girls traded Willowbrook. None craved to hold the hold after all that had transpired there, and shifted together to Mobile, where they dwelt hush, aiding each other and rearing the seed as a shared kin. They never wed. The seed grew kenning their roots, kenning the tangled truth of how they dawned. Elijah was granted his liberty with coinmen from the trade of Willowbrook's goods. He shifted to Indiana, where he toiled as a woodwright and dwelt calm till his end in 1891. He never voiced open on what transpired at Willowbrook, but he kept the false ground scroll Josiah had given, a mind of how vows from mighty souls could be blades as much as boons. Lawman Ezekiel Thorne held as Willow Parish lawman for another score afore resting. His probe of Josiah Beaumont made him brief famed, but he found the heat uneasy. He'd merely done what any law soul should, ward prey and chase felons, sans heed to their stand. The truth that this was deemed rar said more on Mississippi's right web than on his own make. Josiah Beaumont faded in cage in 1859 of lung woe. He never expressed rue for his acts. In his final missive to Eliza he penned, I did what craved to bind our kin. Lore will weigh me kinder than this rotted bench has. Eliza ashed the missive sans reply. The suit stayed stormy for scores. Some lore scribes later claimed it marked the bounds of sire might finally checked by code. Others noted that like harms held on holds through the delta. Unchased and untold for prey were bound and held no path to right. Josiah's sin was not lone, they claimed. Only his chase was. The 3 seed grew and at length wove into northern fold as much as blended souls could in 19th turn America. Ezekiel Beaumont became a tutor in Indiana. Faith Beaumont wed a free-shadowed trader and shifted to Boston. Elijah Beaumont became a preacher and rights caller, giving his span to war the very web that had birthed him. Willowbrook Plantation was at length split and traded to many buyers. The great house stood void for years before burning in 1867. Some said fire set, others vowed storm. Either path, noon mourned its ash. The soil returned to till. The dark lore slow forgot by all save those whose spans had been shattered by Josiah's crave. Today, if you tread Willow Parish and query on the Beaumont suit, you'll find most souls never eared it. The scrolls dwell in state hoards entombed among thousands of other lawsuits from that age. But the tale serves as a mind of how might, unchecked and unqueried, can turn plain ruth into methodical dread. It shows how webs, benches, leeches, local rules can turn allies toil when they prize coin and rank over right. Josiah Beaumont trusted he wove a mark. Instead, he shattered his kin and bared the rot that made his sins able. His name, which he'd been so desperate to bind, became attied with fiend. His grand right in bloodlines birthed only woe and loss. Maybe that's the true sermon of Willowbrook, that some marks deserve to fade, and that the souls we chain, whether by irons or by vein, will at last be the ones who voice the true lament of who we were. What do you reckon of this lament? Do you trust all Josiah Beaumont wrought was fully bared? Or could there have been deeper shadows entombed at Willowbrook? Drop your musings below with your thoughts. If you savor this dirge and crave more lore-dread tales like this, in the shadowed crypts of forgotten litanies, where dread's hymn calls your name, subscribe to Forgotten Liturgy now, lest the silence swallow your soul's craving for more. Tap that alert bell so you never miss a verse, and share this vision with one who heeds the bleakest nooks of American lore. Till next tide, mind, the yester is never as distant as we'd pray to trust.